Hello, Alexis.
Hello, Rachel. How are you tonight?
I'm doing fairly well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm also very well. Thank you. Quite excited to be here again. This topic today is an extension on last week because we have so much material that has been coming up around this topic that this is now part two. Would you like to introduce tonight's theme, Rachel?
Sure. So last Sunday we talked a bit about the shadow, the shadow in the psyche, which we defined as the parts of our mind which we either are not aware of or which we don't want to be aware of. So a simple way to think about it is the thoughts, feelings, memories, impulses, feelings that we have repressed and suppressed. And I want to talk about the difference between repression and suppression shortly. And these this material in our psyche still motivates us, still affects us, even if we don't own it. And in fact, the less we look into our shadow, the less we own the different parts of it, the more impact that it's going to have on us. So you're right. It's a massive topic. That's why we're back again to talk about it.
Absolutely. So before we hear the difference between suppression and repression, that's interesting because, I think we can all relate to that, but there's some aspects of our lives that we try to keep under wraps. In fact, that was a comment somebody made last week, that we all have a chapter in our lives that we kind of hide in a black box. And I would also argue that we all have aspects of ourselves that we're not so willing to share. But why, in your opinion, Rachel, would you recommend people actually unpack that black box or be willing to shine that torch of awareness into what has been repressed or suppressed? What's the value of shadow work?
That's a really good question. And I would be keen to hear your answer to that question as well. In my view, it's simple. It's just that the memories, the unresolved feelings, the pain around the unfulfilled needs, it's in there anyway. At some level, we retain feelings and experiences that we have not acknowledged or processed. At some level, it's still there. We can deny it for years and years and years, but it will still be having an effect on our lives. And it's really, a lot of energy is bound up in that suffering. And it's quite liberating when we can find a safe way to talk about what's embarrassing, talk about what's painful, talk about what's scary, talk about what's hard. And whether it's a dialogue with ourselves or another. And it actually liberates some of that energy that has been bound up in the unconscious and in the suffering. And it starts to help you accept yourself and connect with others and see your own humanity. I mean, there's so many ways I could say it, but that's my answer.
That is fabulous. So it's about liberating the energy that's otherwise tied up in the repression or the suppression, yes. And not only embracing those aspects of ourselves, but then being able to be with others around, in those particular domains, those particular aspects.
Exactly. And in a very, very simple, this all sounds kind of really nice, but theoretical, in a simple kind of a couple of examples, is sometimes when clients tell their story to me as their therapist for the very first time, sometimes they'll say, oh, I feel so much better. Just very simple, it doesn't have to be academic sounding in practice. It's just, thank you for listening. I haven't really told anyone that before. And you can see the liberation of the energy. Or in groups that I've been in where people share a story and someone else says, thank you for sharing that, because I've experienced something similar, or that resonates for me. And then suddenly they feel lighter, they feel connected. They haven't been withholding all of that inside them. They're no longer withholding that.
So you've just raised a very interesting point about safety, and we will go into, I know you have suggestions for people as to ways that they can confront the shadow.
Mm.
And you've touched on safety, which I know is something you and I are very strong on in our workshops, in all of the work we do, that being able to look at those aspects of self that we're not proud of requires safety, that we can provide that for ourselves, and we can also demonstrate it to each other.
Trust and safety, which go together hand in hand. Yeah.
Yes. So you, well, suppression and repression, before we get too far along, how do you define the difference? That's part B, because part A of the question, if I may, is around shame being a social emotion. You have defined shame as sitting in the shadow, basically that which that brings out fear and anger. So probably if we could invite listeners to just acknowledge that anger and shame do exist in the human experience, then how do you describe the difference between repression and suppression?
Well, I'm going with Anna Freud's definitions, because she outlined defense mechanisms much more clearly than her father. Go Anna. Yeah. And her father, Sigmund Freud, who everyone must have heard of. Yes. Anna Freud suggested that suppression is a more conscious mechanism, that something will come into the mind and we're conscious of the fact that we don't want to think about it. And it can be healthy, because like in my work, something might pop in and I might say to myself, I'm going to park that for later. You know, it's not appropriate right now that I deal with that. So I suppress it. And it's a conscious defense mechanism. And I'm usually more able to go back and access that thought, that feeling, that memory later on. But in repression, it's one of the unconscious defense mechanisms, so very biologically based, not even really a psychological thing, more a physiological thing. So probably related to the vagus nerve freeze response. There's just a shutting down. We can't even access that material consciously, even if we want to. It might come up in our dreams. We might get triggered by a new life situation, but it's much harder to access the repressed memories and feelings and material of our psyche. That's the difference.
Wow, that is absolutely fascinating. Brings to mind hypnosis as well, which a colleague of ours practices as a means to access that which lies deep. And my sense is that meditation does allow, a deep meditation does allow for that repression to come up, often in a way that is quite spontaneous. When we quieten the mind sufficiently, it does come naturally. Even a sense of what was completely unknown can come into the known.
And in a good way as well. Of creative people and artistic people often say they need to get still and calm and reflective for the beautiful and joyful aspects of the unconscious mind to surface. And so, there's many aspects that are difficult to access in ourselves that are absolutely facilitated by a relaxed state, a contemplative state, for sure.
I love that you mentioned dreams as well. I know that you and I are taking more interest in our dreams, and that does seem to be a simple way to access those aspects of self that are not there during the day, during the light hours, that come out of the unconscious.
Yeah, I mean, I've just, because we've been listening to the Jungian Life podcast, both of us, I've started to write down my dreams or record them on my voice record app, just so I can remember them for later, so I can look into them. I wanted to just sort of rewind a little bit, Alexis, because we've got a couple of questions already.
Oh, great.
And Kirsten asks, what happens when you tell your story, but that still isn't enough? And that's absolutely normally, Kirsten, how it would go, it's only step one.
Yeah.
In Brene Brown's shame resilience theory, which very much is relevant here, speaking our shame is step one, but there are more steps after that. So,
I see this a lot in my clinical practice, because usually by the time people come to see me, they have shared their story several times. Yes. And they're often at the point where they tell me, I actually don't need to retell the story.
Yeah, exactly.
I need to understand or make sense of, which is really what happens in this space.
And that's what step two is. Step two is make sense of, understand, or get to the root of the emotions and experiences that are still lingering around the story. One of which we were chatting before the video is about our core beliefs, our unconscious core beliefs, which we can make conscious. And that is the work of contemplative practices, of psychotherapy, is to try and unearth some of our beliefs that are driving us, that may have formed, in the past in response to not having our needs met, or interpreting experiences in a particular way, which is a multifaceted experience. So yeah, there's definitely the step after telling your story is to make sense of your experience, and then to bring in self-compassion, self-kindness, and self-esteem, self-belief.
Yes, the core beliefs are absolutely fascinating, and I'm seeing more and more how they play out in my relationships. I'm not sure if you've had this experience, Rachel, where, when you start to really acknowledge your thinking, particularly those repetitive thoughts, whether it's, I'm not good enough, or I can't. And again, before this video, we were talking about the shadow victimhood, living in the shadow, and all of those dependence type qualities that do play out in our relationships, whether, in our parenting or with our spouse, or even in our friendships. It seems to me that these core beliefs, as made manifest through our constant self-talk, will influence those around us. So again, this is a valid reason to do this work, because it allows for a much cleaner relationship. If I've owned what is mine, I can recognize that's that core belief that I have generated, from potentially way back. And I'm now playing it out in some unconscious way. I can again start to bring that into light and own it. You said that earlier. Own my shadow.
Yeah. It's hard, and it can be painful, but it is worth it, because if it's in you, it's yours. And if you don't own it, if you disavow it, that's going to be worse for you in the long run. So, this is where we get the many sort of stories and mythologies where there's a split, between sort of the Jekyll and the Hyde, or the good man who's possessed by a demon, or Luke Skywalker, finding his own face in Darth Vader's suit in Empire Strikes Back. We kind of have these stories and mythologies around, characters discovering, oh gosh, me too. Hashtag me too. I've also got this dark stuff in me. And now I need to own that, recognize that. And Mia actually has made a comment on the back of Kirsten's comment. She said, what happens if you're not believed? I mean, this is something that I come across in my clinical work. People who disclosed something very difficult, and either they weren't believed, they weren't believed that this is actually what happened to them, or they were judged because perhaps it's something they've done that they're ashamed of. And either being not believed or being judged is definitely going to push the shadow stuff back underground if we're not careful. So this points to, just to answer Mia's question, this points to part of Brene Brown's shame resilience theory, which is find a community or
Mm.
find people who are safe,
Mm.
who you can trust,
Mm.
who will, to the best of their ability, accept you. And is this hard to do? At first, absolutely. It can be really hard to find those people,
Mm.
but they are out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and it brings to mind also the difficulty within our culture in facing the shadow, and for whether it was Mia or Kirsten, to have shared a story and for that not to have been acknowledged even indicates that the listener did not have that capacity to embrace those aspects within themselves, which is very common unless you've actively done some shadow work. It's only inevitable that, as per our discussion last week, that it becomes a no-go zone.
Yeah.
And that really, when we do embrace the shadow, we also then build that capacity to be with somebody else in their shadow.
Yeah, that's right. And what a powerful thing that is to do for another human being, is sit together and be with each other in all your failings and imperfections and flaws and shadowy stuff. I think actually we have a craving for that. I mean, this is why we go and see scary movies, and we all have sort of morbid curiosities about, other people's shadowy behaviors. And it's the stuff of art and film, and even people's obsession with the news, with the bad news, the tragic news, because I think we actually have a yearning to integrate and to see the wholeness of a human being, the good and the bad, the light and the dark. It's what you said before we started the video. I think you said something about the light and the dark. We can't have darkness without light, and vice versa. So, I mean, this is such an archetypal sort of theme that, let's be real, everyone, like everyone has a shadow. We all have material in our lives and in our minds that is embarrassing, shameful, painful, difficult, scary, and it seems like psychologists and artists and filmmakers are dealing in this stuff. Everybody else thinks we should just be positive and happy and fully together all of the time. And
yeah, I hear that. And Hollywood may have a bit to do with that, but but that brings to mind also that there is an opportunity coming up. It's in the ether at the moment, and I am certainly feeling it. A little bit of context: I am doing a healing separation, or a period of self-growth at the moment, which has definitely been enabling more shadow work. And the opportunity that's coming up for all of us is, of course, Halloween, which is a constructive way to personify aspects of the shadow. And we do anyway. People are dressing as witches, or your evil Marilyn Monroe. I mean, she's an aspect of your shadow, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on whether that is a constructive way? Is that some way that you would encourage people to look at those emotions or aspects of self that they wouldn't normally, day to day?
In fact, I think this is my interest in comedy as well, because once we can accept and normalize things that are often in the shadow, then we can play with them, whether it's through costumes on Halloween, whether it's through comedy. If we can laugh at and a lot of emergency department surgeons that I've worked with have very black humor.
Yes.
And lawyers and people who work in
first-line defense. It's well known. Yeah,
exactly. So once we take things out of the shadows and bring light on them, see my candles are representing bringing the light. My fingernails are representing the dark.
Perfect combination.
And once we can, bring some acceptance and normalizing to pain and suffering, then we can, we can do things. It can actually be used to make art, to make comedy, to laugh, and also to connect and find that shared humanity. Hey, Alexis, we've got a couple of more questions here. Do you mind if I turn our attention to those?
Please do. Yes, thank you for manning the questions, Rachel.
First of all, Glenn Stevens, who I happen to know is a very funny fellow, he says his costume is going to be his shadow self, aka Carl Stefanovic.
Oh,
Thanks, Glenn.
maybe you could post a pic on Halloween.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Glenn. Sarah says, can something be both repressed and remembered, but with an absence of feeling attached? I'm so glad you asked that, Sarah, about repression. My answer is yes, because what we've repressed is the memory of the emotional content. We may have an episode, what we call an episodic memory. We know a thing happened, but we are numb to the feeling, and we were numb to the feeling at the time because dissociation, which is physiological, because survival, and we may still be numb now when we talk about it or remember it. So the aspect of the memory that's repressed is the emotional component.
And on that, Rachel, I would also say that the emotional component can be revisited without the memory content. That's been my experience of trauma resolution, that it can be a very simple, direct, and even spontaneous. I want to say effortless. It's not entirely effortless, but a very gentle way to deal with repressed experiences is really through the body.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had experience with that or what your thoughts are, Rachel.
Yeah, I absolutely. I often say to clients, don't push hard to try and remember things from, even if it's a week ago or 25 years ago. Don't force yourself to remember. If the emotions are coming up and you don't know where they're coming from, that's okay too. Let's work with that. If the memories are coming up without emotions, that's okay too. Let's work with that. Let's work with whatever our mind and body is giving us. And I've had personal experiences of attending yoga classes, strong emotion coming up through the asanas. Is that how I pronounce it?
Yeah.
And then literally once running out of my yoga class to my car and bursting into tears, and never really quite figuring out what that emotion was connected to in terms of my earlier experiences or current experiences. I actually sat in my car trying to practice self-compassion and not self-pity. And I thought to myself, it doesn't matter. If I don't know what this emotion is about, it doesn't really matter. The fact is, my body is giving it to me. It's processing it. Now I'm conscious of it because I'm feeling it. And I just let it move through me. And I kind of cried. And I told myself that, that this was okay and that just stay with it, be with it. And I'm sure that it was a very cathartic and healing experience. And I'm still not sure what it was about. And that's okay.
That's been my experience, absolutely, that emotions arise and sensation also. It just arises and we don't need to understand it for it to be resolved. We just need to be present and love ourselves no matter what.
And really trust and believe in the intelligence of the body and the unconscious mind, because the unconscious mind and body has an intelligence of its own. And it's not this bit here. This bit here is amazing, by the way. It's really helpful to have an intellect, because language, and that helps, enormously to connect.
To bring the unknown into the known. That's what language does.
Language helps make the unconscious conscious. But this is not the only intelligence. The unconscious and body has its own different, very different kind of intelligence. There's a question here. Do you mind if I read it, Alexa?
Please, go ahead, yes.
The Great Divergence says, I've spiraled into anger and grief since facing a particular suppressed issue, and it's hard to pull out of that and be present in my role as a parent and caregiver. Mindfulness practice is hard with my significant trauma and ADHD. Some strategies for addressing this would be awesome.
Great.
So that's a big question, and there's a lot of work in there, I can tell, and it sounds like you're doing it. So that's to your credit.
Well, this woman's done very well to identify anger and grief. They're both emotions that sit in the shadow neither of which are particularly socially welcomed. And yet my experience has been that being present to my own anger and being present to my own grief has been deeply, deeply empowering and transformative. And the practice that I use personally is an extension upon mindfulness. Mindfulness didn't teach me this. It only really happened probably since we have been talking, Rachel. But for me to learn to be with an emotion is to locate it in my body, and then to sit deliberately when it's coming up. And even if I can sit for 5 minutes, I can build tolerance to it such that it doesn't own me, that I can be with that aspect of my shadow. And therefore I can go about my day as a parent or as a spouse or a friend without it trying to knock on the door saying, hey, I'm here. I've attended to it, just like a child. You know that when you attend to your child, you've met the child's need, then you can go back to what you're doing. But if you're doing something and the child keeps coming, it'll only get louder. And my experience is very much the same with our emotions.
I agree with you. And I often say to myself and my clients, it's all a big experiment in a way, because there's exactly what you've described, which is somatic experiencing or somatic awareness, somatic just meaning body. So if you asked me before we started recording, where do I feel shame when I felt it? And I really had to contemplate for a moment. And I realized I often feel it in my face and in my throat, and maybe sometimes here, because it is one of those emotions that can tighten us up in our mind, face, the flushing face, the warm wash of shame, and throat. And sometimes simply experiencing the body directly, speaking kindly to yourself, to ground yourself, be with it, stay with it. I'll say to myself, Rachel, just be with this, stay with this. And I like Brene Brown's tip. I think I've said this a few times, but I really like it. The one where if we feel pain, or discomfort, but I like the word pain sometimes, because sometimes it is painful to have overwhelming emotions. And I might say to myself, pain, 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 or discomfort, 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 discomfort. And the reason I have that one word, it just anchors me, because the mind is so twitchy. The mind is like a monkey jumping from branch to branch, and it will dissociate. It will jump away from the pain, just like a hand will pull away from the hot stove, sometimes very reflexively and automatically. So using one word to anchor me, or a couple of words, so I can stay with it, stay with it, stay with it, stay with it. Now, someone's asked the question though, what if these emotions are too overwhelming? Kirsten asked that question. And I just want to introduce, I said it's all a big experiment. I'd like to introduce another concept, because there's no shame in dissociation either, right, Alexis?
Say that again, Rach.
Oh, there's no shame in our dissociation either.
Yes. I may have been dissociated in that moment. My apologies.
The fact that we dissociate, that we go away from feelings, that we go numb, that we freeze, that we shut down, there's no shame in that. That's
Absolutely not. Yeah.
It happens to all of us. We all go into denial and repression. We all go into shutdown. But if you're getting overwhelmed by emotion, which is kind of the opposite of shutdown, I want to go back to this concept of suppression, which is a more conscious decision to shut something down temporarily. Now, there's probably a multitude of ways of doing that. We can self-soothe, or we can actually say to ourselves, I'm going to write a note here. It's sometimes with my dreams, if I wake up from a disturbing dream, I'll record the dream, and I'll come back to that later.
Park it. That was a useful description. Yeah. Park it.
Sometimes we can park something. I mean, sometimes people are parking their emotions through antidepressants. As long as they're doing it in a conscious or sort of planful way, it can be very helpful to park something until I'm in the right conditions or environment to deal with it. And in psychology, we've stolen a word from chemistry, and the word is titration. Do you know what that means in chemistry, Alexa?
Oh, I do. It's about acids and bases. So I have considered that. It doesn't really translate, but I love that you use it anyway.
Well, I mean, because Bessel van der Kolk talks a bit about titration.
Yeah.
And in psychology, it's about a little bit at a time. In chemistry, I believe
Yes.
adding
so you
to
drop an acid into a base and there's a change in the color when the pH is neutral. So
right.
it must be to do with the micro dosing.
Micro dosing, thank you. Titration is micro dosing. So if we've got, like say with grief, if we realize we've got a whole lot of grief around an issue, some sort of loss or something from the past or current, we can't grieve all at once. You can't get that over and done with in a day.
Yeah.
So, we might have to microdose on the emotion. We might need to just accept that we're going to do it bit by bit. And sometimes we might have to say, that's enough for today. I'm going to go and do something nice. I'm going to go and, catch a comedy show. I'm just going to suppress this for a while and come back to it. And so it's good to have a list of pleasant events. We call them in psychology pleasant event scheduling. And it's okay to do something really nice that's going to make you feel good. And suppress that stress or emotion for a while as well, as long as you're sort of trying to work consciously with the material that's coming up in you and not drinking yourself into a stupor or, doing.
And so long as, and I'm going to raise this because I think unless we actively bring courage to facing it, I do believe we do need to allow time and space for difficulty and pain and suffering and grief and anger to come up, and that we do need to deliberately shine the torch of awareness on it.
Yes.
A, because culturally we are taught to suppress it.
Yeah.
And B, because our lives are so full that unless we are deliberate about bringing it center stage, it can stay there. We can continue sweeping it under the rug. And that's why, I think for you and I, we do this as a living. It's much easier to say. But I think for those who are not, in a space where there's a lot of emotional discussion or not encouraged to perpetually self-grow, I think the tendency can be to sweep things under the rug for years and years, becoming decades, and leading to all sorts of resentment that lies in someone's existence. So yes, I do agree with you. Parking it is valuable if it is then unparked again. Yeah.
Absolutely. Otherwise it just stays in the shadows forever. And, stuff that stays in the shadows can make us sick.
Yes, absolutely. And on that, before we start to come to a close, but along with your technique of pain, which I love because it holds us in it, and it also gives it language. It makes it more concrete, it makes it more manageable, as opposed to being flooding or overwhelmed with all sorts of things in the mix. Similar to that. And you have taught me to use language, really, Rachel. I so honour you for that, because my language prior to using my mouth was really my body. And I have found that in the same way, for example, I've been working with fear since our workshop last Sunday, and it lives absolutely in my right thigh. It's fascinating. I have not come across this in any theory other than to know that I've been present with my right thigh. I've been working with pressure points. I've been working with dry needling. And it's helping me to be with it without the content of the fear. Yeah, it's quite a fascinating experience just to locate and be with it at the physical level. It still holds that presence, but without the overwhelm. That's been my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. I've had clients tell me they are storing emotions in their thighs, in their hips, and in their, of course, in the usual places, in their gut, in their backs, in their shoulders, in their throats, in their, and other places as well. And what you just said about staying with it content free was interesting. It makes me think of something I often say to my clients, which is spend time with yourself. And when I mean with yourself, I don't mean dissociating in a YouTube rabbit hole, which we've all done, of course. But I mean, with your pain, with your discomfort, spend time with yourself in this way, because you are good enough to spend time with. This was one of the aspects I spoke about before, which is believing in your own worthiness. And worthiness has no prerequisites. So unless you believe that you are worthy of your own attention and of your own compassion, then it will be much harder to do this. So we almost need to start with giving ourselves permission to see ourselves as worthy enough, good enough to stay with our own discomfort, pain, our own journey, our own healing. It's not selfish, because in the process, you will connect with others. Mm-hmm. You just will. Mm-hmm.
And that is a lovely segue to share the opportunities to connect with our community.
Yes. Please, would you tell everyone about, I know there's some more comments coming up, but we may have to.
I know, we might even have to segue into part 3. So we have next Sunday is our monthly practice group. Mm-hmm. This is an opportunity to meet in person here in Graceville. Now, for those of you who are regulars, we're now shifting up to the Graceville Bowls Club. We've burst the banks of my waiting room here at One Natural Therapies. So please join us at the Graceville Bowls. That's next Sunday, 9:30 to 11:30. And I have a meetup link I'll include in the comments below.
Thank you.
Then we also have a couple of workshops, which I think incredibly poignant for today. Attachment theory. We're meeting together on the November the 14th, again, it's Sunday.
Yep.
That one is 9 a.m. until 1:15. And then our final workshop for the year is going to be the spirituality of nonviolent communication. This is a theme that has been running through our conversations, nonviolent communication. It's very much a needs-based approach.
Yep.
And that will be on the 12th of December, again, 9 until 1:15.
And can I just check with you, Alexis, in real time? And that'll be at the Graceville Bowls Club, as far as you know?
Yes, yes, we've had that confirmation. So all of our events before the end of the year will be at the Graceville Bowls Club. A beautiful space. We've got floorboards, we've got sunshine, we've got a big whiteboard, which Rachel and I love. So yes, we look forward to that. So nonviolent communication community group is this coming Sunday. That'll be the 31st.
Okay. Halloween.
True.
We're dressed up in our Halloween garb.
Now you're talking. Yeah.
I think I might just have to have a little bit of Halloweeny stuff.
Oh, it's in the air. It is absolutely in the air.
All right. And I might even have an activity for us that has something to do with shadow work.
Ooh, and on that, if I may just share my screen for one moment, because I have an image of Persephone, and I'll tell you a bit about her as you take a look. Is she showing up now?
Yeah, I can see her.
Okay, so Persephone is the goddess of the underworld. She is the daughter of Zeus and Demeter. So you can see she has this kind of wholesome quality to her. Demeter is the goddess of harvest and the earth. So while she's obviously incredibly saucy and powerful, she is the daughter of a wholesome mother. And Zeus, we all know, is the incredible, powerful god. I think he might be considered one of the greatest. Anyway, Persephone comes out from the underworld every so often. And that will be when you are experiencing your shadow. She's just here to say, yes, I'm here all along. She comes out once a year during winter, when we all have to delve deep into the shadow. She was abducted to the underworld. So she didn't choose it, but she does come out when we least expect her. So we can go visit her, and, I'm hoping that she's inspiring. So your Halloween costume next week, Rach.
For our practice group next Sunday, I want you to turn up looking like that, okay?
Well, but if the last 2 weeks are anything to go by. Yes,
I
Halloween is in the air.
I expect the skulls and the whole paraphernalia. Okay.
Oh, you should. Do I show you my outfit? I was going African drumming. I'm not sure. It's a little bit much, but I went there.
Okay, we want to see. You've got to show us now that you've said that.
The outfit.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes. As so Halloween's in the air. Dr. Rachel, I so enjoy our time together.
Yes,
I must roll. And
I have to go to and finish my dinner cooking activities. Can you please put links in the below for the workshops? That would be great if you could do that, Alexa.
I will, absolutely. I'll do that right now.
Thank you, everybody who is listening.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for your questions and comments. And Rachel, we won't be here next Sunday. Is that true to say?
It's my daughter's birthday, so no, we won't be here, but we'll be back the following Sunday.
Yeah, see you in a fortnight.
Okay, great. See you.
Bye.